Who's ready for fair food at home? Well, come on and watch this video on how I make my corn dogs. First, we're going to start with paprika, red ancho chili powder, Spanish paprika, salt, baking powder, milk, sugar, and I didn't have any cream corn, so I went ahead and blended up myself inside my Ninja blender. And then I'm also going to have my measuring cup for my flour, have my bowl, I have a little cornstarch, we have some beef hot dogs, or you could use whatever hot dogs that you like. I also have my self-rising cornmeal. You can use yellow if you want, and my all-purpose flour, and of course 2 eggs that is going to be used in this recipe. So first I'm going to start with 1 cup of my cornmeal. Now, like I said earlier, you can use yellow cornmeal, but I only had the white, so I'm using 1 cup of that. And then I'm going to also use 1 cup of my all-purpose flour. Now, if you're using self-rising flour, of course, you will not have to use the salt and you won't have to use baking powder. I'm only using a small portion because I don't have both of the self-rising. Now here I'm adding my paprika and my red ancho chili powder. And then I'm also adding my smoky paprika or my Spanish paprika along with a pinch of salt. And this is my baking powder. And I'm going to mix all of these dry ingredients together. Oh yes, don't forget the sugar. And we're going to whisk this all up really well and make sure everything is incorporated. Now for our wet ingredients, I'm going to start with my eggs, and I'm going to add 1 egg at a time. And I always separate my egg first inside of the bowl. And then I'm going to do my 2nd egg, and I'm going to go ahead and crack that open and add that into the bowl as well with my dry ingredients. Next, I'm going to add the rest of my wet, which is my cream corn. This is probably about a 1/2 cup. I kind of eyeball it. And then I'm also going to add my milk. I did not add all of the milk because I wanted to see how the consistency was going to turn out. So I added small portions at a time, and I went ahead and I stirred it all together. As you can see, my batter was still a little bit on the thick side. So as I mixed this up, I realized it needed a little bit more milk. And so that's what I ended up doing. I added probably about 1/4 of a cup more of the milk just to get the batter a little bit looser. And this is the consistency that I was looking for. Almost like what you're going to use when you're going to make your cornbread. And I have my oil already heated while I was getting my ingredients together. And so now I'm going to use a stick, and you can use whatever type of skewer you have. It was pre-soaked, and I'm going to take my time and slide this through the hot dog. You don't want it to come to the other side, so you got to make sure you take your time. And then here is when I'm going to add my cornstarch on top of the corn dog. Now, I was trying both methods. I was told that if you added the cornstarch on the hot dog, that this will help the corn dog to hold on to the cornmeal when it's added. So when I realized that I couldn't dip the whole corn dog in, I went ahead and grabbed a spoon. But I tried to make sure that the hot dog was completely covered with the cornstarch before I dipped it into my cornmeal mixture. And I forgot to show you guys how I dipped it in my cornmeal mixture. But as you can see, my corn dog is starting to come together, and it is starting to brown really nicely. So we speed up the camera, and I went ahead and tried it without the cornstarch. And as you can see, it seems to still hold on to a little bit of the cornmeal, still trying to hold on a little bit to the hot dog. But so far, so good. And we just kind of work and let it get all nice and brown. We want the internal temperature of the hot dog to be 165 degrees. And this corn dog is nice and brown. And I like my corn dog to be a little bit on the extra toasty side. I like mine really nice and crispy. So on my left is the cornstarch. On my right is no cornstarch. And we went ahead and sped up the camera a little bit to show you how I went ahead and just pretty much did the same process over again. And this time I use without a stick, but you can choose either cornstarch or no cornstarch. And this seemed to be a little bit quicker too. And with all my corn dogs, this is how it ended. Quite nice. Finger food. Now to see how they taste. Well, since my corn dogs are now completed, I like mine with mustard. So we're going to see how this come out. It's completely done. This is the corn dog that I did not use cornstarch and wrapped it around before I dipped it into the cornmeal. Still came out really tasty. I could taste a little bit of that chili. Cornmeal is completely done around the corn dog. There's no wetness. I must say, for a homemade corn dog, this is pretty good. A little bit of a crunch. It came out really tasty. So, if you like this recipe, please click like, share, and subscribe this. And feel free to try something a little different. The corn that's in it that I used was white kernel corn, and it gave it that little extra sweetness to it. For some of you who don't want to go through the whole homemade process, you can use Jiffy Mix, but I'm not a big fan of Jiffy. I like to make mine from scratch or homemade, so that's why I did all those steps. If you're using all-purpose flour and straight cornmeal, then you will have to add the salt and the baking powder. But because I used self-rising cornmeal mix and all-purpose, I only used a little bit of the salt and a little pinch of the baking powder. But if you're using all self-rising flour and self-rising cornmeal mix, you can omit the salt and the baking powder. But either way, you should come up with a really nice, delicious corn dog. I hope you enjoyed this video, and like I said, click like, share, and subscribe, and you all have a great day. I'm going to enjoy this corn dog and remind myself of the fun time that I had at the fair.